Welcome to Born on the Bayou Sports, a Houston sports show made for Houstonians by Houstonians. Join Tim Costello and Scott Barzilla every week as they break down the latest in Houston Astros, Rockets, and Texans news. Tim's a former minor league broadcaster, and Scott has written 2 books on the Baseball Hall of Fame. Yeah, if Javier could get it figured out, it would make things a lot easier because he was that guy everybody was counting on this year to be a Cy Young candidate, take that big step forward and help anchor this rotation with Fromber.
Since he's come to Houston, you can look at the development of guys like Carlos Correa defensively, Jeremy Pena defensively. I mean, you can Alex Bregman's, certainly I think a better than average third baseman.
And now you're putting teams in 3rd and 8, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 9. Now here comes Will Anderson. Pin back your ears, let's go. So if you're Bayou born and bred, or just like spending time in the H, sit down, relax, and stay Houston strong. Welcome all my friends to a somber edition here of Born on the Bayou Sports. Tim Costello, Scott Barzilla coming to you on the eve of, the night of the Astros being knocked out of the AL playoffs in the wild card round. And Scott, you and I are essentially in mourning here right now.
Yeah, and I was going to say, even before, the events of the last 2 days, it was going to be a fairly somber episode. And one name that we're not going to mention tonight, at least at length, John Amos also passed away.
Yeah. What's your favorite John Amos role, I guess I should say?
Yeah, I am a West Wing guy.
I was going to say the West Wing too. I loved him in the West Wing.
I liked him in the West Wing, but to me, as Mr. McDowell in Coming to America, that movie, I'm almost sad that they produced a sequel. I mean, it should have just stood alone. It's just an absolute work of art.
Yeah, I love Coming to America. I haven't seen the second one yet, so I can't tell you whether I like it or not, but I love him in the West Wing, Joint Chief of Staff. Yeah, man, he kills it. He absolutely kills it as the head of the of all of the military of the United States.
Did you ever see any Good Times?
I've never seen Good Times.
I mean, he plays a very different role in that one. He's kind of more he's obviously no nonsense in West Wing. But I mean, he's like a hard ass. He's gonna whip your butt in Good Times. And JJ, obviously deserved that more than once.
Well, you mentioned this is going to be a somber episode. There were a couple, athlete deaths, and the first one I wanted to talk about, and you did as well, was Dikembe Mutombo, a man who at times seemed larger than life, who all you had to do was go like this, or for those of you just listening, the finger wag, and everybody knew who you were talking about. All you had to do was go, no, no, no. Everybody knew who you were talking about. One of the top 20 defensive centers to ever play the NBA. And I still feel like saying all of that, you're leaving out the most important part of his legacy, which is the humanitarian work that he did in the Congo.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is if you compare him to the other famous African center in the NBA, I mean, the fact that Akeem Olajuwon can come in second as a humanitarian tells you exactly what you need to know about Mutombo.
I mean, we're talking hospitals. We are talking regular doctor's offices. We are talking homes, houses, churches, everything and anything, infrastructure, ways to get food in. Dikembe Mutombo spent so much time, so much money, and really, wanted to make his home country proud and then bring the fruits of that, his labor, back home and make life better for everybody else around him. I think the comments his son made after his dad's passing, very much echoed that sentiment of, hey, my dad was a great guy, basically, and he was like he's a Hall of Fame talent in the NBA, but he went so far beyond that in life, and I don't know if it would be a stretch, Scott. You have the Roberto Clemente Award, for the guy who does the most humanitarian work in Major League Baseball. I don't think it would be outrageous to have a Dikembe Mutombo Award for someone who does the most amount of humanitarian that work. I'm sorry, the most amount of humanitarian work that year in the NBA.
Oh yeah, and you already have the Walter Payton Award in the NFL. So I mean, it's high time for the NBA to get on board and pick this up. To me, if we shift to the playing portion of his career, what was remarkable about Dikembe is that you're doing the whole finger wagging thing. He managed to, I think, find that fine line between having a personality on the court and not being an asshole. And that's hard, and that's hard to do because so many of today's players, just they can't seem to toe that line. And then the other part of it too is that the modern NBA demands so many skills of their big men, which seems to include 3-point shooting and outside shooting. That wasn't Dikembe Mutombo. Dikembe Mutombo was a defensive specialist, but he played nearly 20 years in the league being able to do that and succeed at a high level. I mean, that's also something you don't see very often.
It came in the league in 1991, played all the way through 2009. The last 5 seasons in Houston when he was there primarily to back up Yao, but most times got way more run because Yao got hurt. His career, he had 9.8 points a game, 10 rebounds a game. At his height or his prime, you could say he was a little bit more of a scorer. Would bring in, uh, you know, 16.6 was his high when he came in second for Rookie of the Year voting. He never scored that many per game again, though. His best season after that, 13.4. But again, this was a guy that was there to rock the paint. He was bringing in 14, 13 rebounds a game. He was blocking 3 to 4 shots a game at his best. He was 4.5 blocks a game. Again, he was a defensive game changer. You had to change the angles at which you brought the ball to the rim. You know, he was not going to let you push him around. He was a guy that owned the middle of the paint, and he did it for a lot of teams too, right? Like he was on some good Denver teams, on some good Atlanta teams. Played for the Nets, the Knicks, the Sixers, and then finishing up in Houston. So a lot of cities across America probably mourning the loss of Dikembe Mutombo.
So I'm trying to remember, and I think this kind of falls into my next question of your favorite Mutombo memory moment. And I'm trying to remember, maybe you can help me out here. You remember that awesome winning streak the Rockets went on without
Yeah.
Yao, 20 games? Was he a Rocket at that point?
That would have been 2007, 8. Yeah, he was a Rocket at that point. Gave you 39 games, played 15, 16 minutes a game, making a field goal a game, so averaging about 2 or 3 points. 3 points a game for him. He was averaging a block a game and bringing in 5 rebounds a game. So he was definitely a part of that.
Yeah, and you're looking at that team, and that's a team that had, Luis Scola, Shane Battier. That was a Tracy team.
Ron Artest, Tracy.
But a very, very flawed basketball team.
Well, not when we were healthy to start the season, and then by the time that streak happened, yeah, because it was
when that streak
Aaron
was
Brooks. Aaron Brooks was playing point guard, who was undersized, so you needed somebody like Mutombo to be on that last line of defense because Aaron Brooks was not even 6 foot playing the point guard.
My favorite Mutombo moment, though, non-Rockets related, was that year that he and the Denver Nuggets, as the 8th seed, beat the Seattle Supersonics, the number 1 seed. And you knew that Denver team wasn't going to go much further than that. But that was still a terrific moment because is basically saying, here's this guy, this flawed basketball player, which he was, but had one absolute skill defense that was just off the charts. And it kind of shows you that, you can make it far if you have one thing that you do and you do it really savagely well.
I mean, Dikembe Mutombo in Houston never played more than 17 minutes a game. I can't tell you how many Dikembe finger wag signs were in the crowd, though. For a guy who was strictly a backup at the end of his career, he was still so beloved that people were making signs to bring to the game for a guy who played barely a third of it, did not even play a third of the game. I mean, that says something about him.
Right. And the fact that he's only playing a third of the game when Yao is out for much of it. So, I mean, for the rest of the game, they're just kind of throwing crap at the wall at the center position and kind of hoping.
Scola played a lot of center. Carl Landry played a lot of center at that point.
Yeah, they were going undersized.
Yeah, that was a great run, man. That was a great run. Took the Lakers to 7 games. Man, that was a good run.
I was at the game when Ron Artest was, I can't remember if it was game 4 or game 5, the one we won in Houston, when I think it was definitely Yao had been injured during that middle of that series.
Yeah.
And so it's no Yao. It was Shane Battier knocking down like something ridiculous, like 7 threes or something like that. And it was just one of those, it's like, this team's not winning this series. But, the joy of winning this game today is just, off the charts.
Absolutely. Well, I think let's transition it because we go from a guy who I'd say, with Dikembe, his legend, his legacy is unquestionable, right? There's really not much negative you could say about him. And then we shift to Pete Rose. Pete Rose, a guy who is very much a questionable legacy. On one hand, one of the greatest ball players ever. On the other hand, bet on his own team, bet on baseball, has been to prison for tax fraud. Not necessarily a great person at all times based on some of the interactions people have had with him. Basically, the kind of the complete opposite of what we're dealing with Dikembe. Scott, how do you quantify the legacy of a guy like Pete Rose?
Well, there's the player side, which I would say the index takes a middle ground with him, because when you hear people describe Pete Rose, you either hear people describe he's one of the 5 best baseball players of all time, or somebody, well, he's just a glorified singles hitter that hung around for a long time. I don't think either of those views is correct. Yeah. I think he's somewhere in between. I think in terms of his playing career, he's definitely a Hall of Fame level player. I don't think there's any question about that. But obviously a guy who's had demons. I think he's a guy that you could credibly claim was kind of screwed over by the process, because, he agreed to the lifetime ban before the Hall of Fame changed the rules and said that you couldn't be in if you were a part of the banned list. So I think he made that agreement thinking, well, okay, I'll be out of baseball, but I'll get in the Hall of Fame. But the problem is with Pete is he was his own worst enemy. He was given, I don't know how many opportunities after being on the ban list to do a full mea culpa and admit his wrongdoing, and he never managed to be able to do it. He always had half-hearted apologies. Yeah, I did it, but kind of stuff. If he had just come out and said, I screwed up, it was my fault, I'm sure all would have been, I don't know if all would have been forgiven, but they would have probably done enough to get him at least on the ballot to be in the Hall of Fame.
I tend to agree with you. I think you definitely have to separate the player from the person with a guy like Pete Rose. And that says something, that alone to me says something about your legacy, right? Where I've got to make a caveat, or I've got to say, well, this or that. I've read his book. Like I truly think a lot of the demons that he has later on in life come from, the prison he put himself in, as the book was called My Prison Without Bars. But again, the guy went to prison for tax fraud, right? Like, this is not just like, oh, I like to drink, I like to do this, the guy went to federal prison for tax fraud. So again, like, you do have to put that into all of this. Now, you're looking at a guy who has some of the best bat control to ever play the game, right? Less than 100 strikeouts in every single season of his career, and only walked 100 times once, and is a career 300 hitter. Has, as you all know, the all-time hits record for Major League Baseball. Was unbelievably versatile. Would play, wherever you asked him to: first base, third base, infield, outfield. Charlie Hustle, famous for blowing up the catcher in an
Ray
All-Star
Fosse.
game,
Ray
which
Fosse.
I would actually posit makes you more of a fucking douchebag than some great hustle player, but whatever. His playing career is the stuff of legends, of heroes. Everything else outside of it is not. It honestly reminds me of like a Billy Martin with a better career.
Yeah, I was thinking. I sent you. Do you remember the H.L. Mencken quote I sent you?
I don't know.
No, basically the whole idea, and this was as it pertained to probably a lot of the political stuff we've been hearing, but basically the whole idea was no complex problem has been made simpler, solved better, and wrong. That basically that simple solutions are never the answer. And so there's a lot of people that come out, oh, just put him in the Hall of Fame, or no, you can never put him in the Hall of Fame. And to me, it's not that simple. To me, number one, you can't tell the history of baseball without Pete Rose. You can't tell the history of baseball without Barry Bonds or Roger Clemens. You just can't. But at the same time, it's hard to reward somebody like that, which is what the Hall of Fame is.
But wouldn't you argue that the reward is taken away if it's done posthumously? If you could never truly enjoy the fruits of your labor by being at that induction?
I agree. I mean, I think we're in agreement here. What I'm saying, though, is that I think the people who argue either so fervently for or against them are not seeing the nuance. And the nuance is that Orlando Cepeda went to federal prison for drug trafficking. I don't know if you remember that.
I didn't know.
And so he went there before he went in the Hall of Fame. So obviously, serving prison time is not necessarily a deal breaker. So then the question is, I mean, and there's a so-called moral clause in for people who are voting in, but I mean, come on, Ty Cobb was a damn racist, a scumbag. Cap Anson is probably personally responsible for the color barrier taking 50 years to be broken. So what exactly, are we holding on to when we're holding on to, well, he was an amoral or an immoral scumbag? Yeah, he was. But you can tell that story in the Hall of Fame. You can include that as part of the plaque.
Absolutely. I mean, and you can even have the scandal or whatever it is be his display, right? Like, every bit of it. He doesn't maybe even have to have the full plaque, right? But we can have a Pete Rose section, and it's going to say, hey, here's all the stuff. You want to tell the story? Here's the story. Hey, here's the Black Sox. You want to tell the story? Here's the story. Here is the people who would be Shoeless Joe Jackson Hall of Fame worthy, Eddie Seacott Hall of Fame worthy, Lefty Williams, maybe, right? Who knows? The index would tell us, Scott. Would Lefty Williams be a Hall of Famer?
No. No.
What about Eddie Seacott? Would have been at least at the time.
Yeah, well, he's kind of that's one of those that's like, if he had been able to get another year or two, which you would assume he would, probably so. He's borderline.
And at the early class time, right? Like,
yeah, at the
when
border,
there's not now's worth of players that you're going against, when you're going against that number, Eddie Seacott was the ace of the league for quite some time.
Yeah, he's a borderline guy as it stands now. Joe Jackson absolutely as a player should be in.
So maybe you have a Gamblers Anonymous section that's no longer anonymous.
A scumbag's wing.
They haven't like set up like a Gamblers Anonymous meeting, and they're all just like wax figures of all the people.
Could you imagine walking into New York and saying, "Here's the scumbag's wing"? You can move Orlando Cepeda and Ty Cobb in there. Maybe Babe Ruth, Mickey Mantle. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, now we have to transition, Scott, and I have to add just a tiny little musical performance. Goodbye, my Astros. Goodbye, my friend. You have been the one. You have been the one for me.
I thought you were
Goodbye,
gonna,
my Astros.
I thought you were going to go Sarah McLachlan on me here. I will remember you.
That's how I'm feeling right now, Scott. Look, a bunch of beaten puppies on TV late at night type of commercials. How I feel.
Okay, so let me lead this off with a little bit of kind of to sober us up a bit, kind of level us out. I did a little bit of number crunching before I get into my critique of the Astros. Our record in the playoffs since 2017 is 58-39. I'd say that's pretty good. Wouldn't you say that's pretty good?
Yeah.
And the whole thing, and to the Orioles, we saw them, a better team than the Astros, a considerably better team than the Royals who they faced, just went down meekly in a 2-game series. I would say if you looked at the Astros and Tigers records, they're fairly similar, going into the playoff hunt. And obviously the Tigers came on strong in August and September. So would that be, do you think, I don't know, would this have been different had we played the Royals?
Absolutely. I truly feel like the Tigers, going into it, I didn't want the Tigers because they were the team that was just red hot. The Tigers remind me of the Rangers last year, where they just were hot, right? Like the Rangers got hot. They played great baseball throughout the whole playoffs. They swept the Orioles to start things off, or maybe it was the Rays. Either way, they swept the number 1 seed. Then they go in and they play great baseball against who was the DS team that they played. Then they go play the Astros. I mean, it's just a team that got hot.
They beat the Orioles.
Okay, so right. So they beat the Rays, then the Orioles, and the Astros. And it was just, a team that got hot. And the Tigers were that team. They were unbelievably hot coming in. I would have taken any other team other than the Tigers, and who knows, maybe if we play game 162 and it doesn't get rained out. I don't know. But at the end of the day, Scott, it doesn't matter that this is how it ended this season, right? Like, because these 2 games were an exact fucking microcosm of the 2024 season. A village of fucking base runners, opportunities galore, and the inability to take advantage of those opportunities. The Astros' offensive numbers do not tell the story of this team because they score in bunches. They'll have, as we pointed out, a game where they score 10 runs, but then they go 6-7 games where they score 1 run, no runs, over and over and over again. And here we are in the biggest series of the year, and through 15 innings, they had 1 run.
You teed this sucker up. Give me my 8-degree drive, my tailor-made driver, and let me whack at this thing for you. Okay, so let me give you some numbers here, Tim. The Astros lost 73 regular season games this year. In 55 of those 73 games that they lost, they scored 3 or fewer runs. Now, I went the other way and I said, okay, let's see how many times they gave up a bunch of runs. So 6 or more runs. You would agree, I think, that if you surrender 6 runs or more, you're probably going to lose, right?
Yeah.
They did that 32 times. But see, here's what I remembered, and I went back and looked at this because I knew this was going to be the case. In 17 of those 73 games, both of those things happened, where they gave up 6 or more runs and scored 3 or fewer. Because this is what, and to me, 2019 Game 7 is this kind of game. And we've seen this game happen, this kind of game happen. The same thing, it sort of happens today, but it's happened throughout the year. The offense goes out there, can't score a lick. And so the starting pitching's holding it close. The bullpen's kind of holding it close. But then Joe Espada says, fuck it. We can't touch this team. I'm going to send out the B team relievers. And they shit the bed. And so the other team scores a bunch of runs late in the game. And so you're looking at it like the numbers I'm looking at, going like, well, the pitching sucked. No, it didn't. You gave up on the game because your offense couldn't score. Okay, playoffs, going back to 2017, 58-39, right? In 30 of those 39 games that we lost, we scored 3 or fewer runs. So what does that tell me, Tim? It tells me that when this team loses, it loses because it can't hit. Period. So when we start talking about the offseason, if we want to invest in re-signing, you say Kikuchi, I think that wouldn't be a bad move. I think that would be a good move. But if you come out and you pull the whole Jerry Hunsicker, Ed Wade, Jeff Lunell, and James Click, Dana Brown, it seems like every offseason since I've been a kid, we need more pitching. Fuck you. We don't need more pitching. We got plenty of fucking pitching. Hunter Brown there pitched his ass off today. Pitched his ass off. Gives up 1 run in 5 2/3 innings. He loses the damn game.
Well, he didn't take the loss.
But he didn't take the loss, but yeah. So what are we doing? What are we doing?
It's unbelievably frustrating because you're absolutely right. I'm looking at this team next year, right? And when you look at the starting rotation, without Kikuchi, you still got Fromber, Hunter Brown, Spencer Arrighetti, and Renel Blanco. All had, I think you would agree, good seasons, and then with Spencer Arrighetti, great signs towards the end of the season. And I would even say it was a good rookie year for Arrighetti,
Sure,
right?
Absolutely.
If you bring Kikuchi back, that's your 5 right there, right? That doesn't even include Luis Garcia. That doesn't include the ghost that is Lance McCullers. That doesn't include Urquidy. That doesn't include Christian Javier,
JP
right?
France.
JP France. That doesn't include any of those guys. So if you decide to bring Kikuchi back, there's your starting 5. Now let's look at the lineup next year. Left field, giant hole. I think you would agree with that.
Yep.
Center field, giant fucking hole. Jake Myers ain't it. Right field, Kyle Tucker. Okay. Third base, as of right now, giant fucking hole. No solution internally. Shortstop, Pena. At best. Average. I think Pena is an average MLB shortstop at this point.
Sure.
Second base, Altuve. Okay. First base, giant fucking hole. Catcher, probably our best position between Diaz and Caratini. So I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4 giant fucking holes in a lineup. And we do have Jordan at DH, obviously. Great. But outside of that, you've got 4 giant question marks offensively and 1 small question mark for the 5th starter.
Yeah, and so here's the deal walking into this series, right? Because I have a chat, since I'm in Crawfish Baskets, and I saw, some of the writers commenting like, if I never see Jeremy Pena again, it'll be a day too soon. Yeah, Jeremy Pena, he had a rough couple of games. I'm not even gonna defend it. But the point is that on any good baseball team, Jerry Pena is a 7th or 8th hitter. Period.
He's hitting 7th for the Astros, or 6th. He's hitting 6th for the Astros.
Well, but for most of the year, he's hitting like 4th or 5th because you're running, or 2nd.
But that's also part of the problem. Is this lineup that we used in the playoffs should have been used more in the season. Caratini and Diaz both should have been in there playing first base and catcher more often.
I would say this team very clearly had, coming into this series, had 2.5 holes in its lineup. Okay, you mentioned left field and center field, absolute holes. There's no getting around that. Jason Hayward unfortunately didn't play game one because he's left-handed and Scooble's left-handed. Okay, I could sit there and see, I want to play Dubon. Okay, fine. I probably would have thrown Hayward in there because I think Hayward's still better than Dubon, even lefty on lefty, but whatever, right? Look at Victor Caratini's career numbers and compare that with any first baseman in the league. And you're looking at it and you're going like, when you're looking at Victor Caratini, you're looking at that as a part-time catcher. Yeah, those are pretty damn good offensive numbers. As a first baseman, you're going like, that's all we got? And Singleton did some good things for you this year, but that's not good enough. So basically, you're walking into a series with 2.5 holes in your lineup. So you're telling the other 6 guys, damn it, guys, show up, or we're going to get our asses kicked. And how many of those 6 guys didn't show up?
Altuve, I think he did not show up in this series. I mean, he had an RBI. He had an RBI today, but again, this game today was lost in the 8th inning, both offensively and obviously we blew it in the bottom of the 8th. But you had bases loaded with nobody out, and you get a fielder's choice with a throwing error that scores a run, and then you get a Altuve first pitch swinging, pop it up in foul territory, and Jeremy Pena makes an amazing play to score your second run, and then that's it. That's all you fucking get. With bases loaded and nobody out, you get 2 runs when you could have stepped on their fucking throats and said, I'll see you tomorrow. We're going to drop a 5 spot here. But instead, you didn't do that. So Altuve, I think, had a big miss. I thought Bregman swung the bat well.
I think Alvarez.
Considering he didn't play for the week beforehand, Alvarez had a great series. Tucker continues to be a no-show in the playoffs for 3 seasons in a row, realistically. I thought the decision to start Chaz today was interesting.
That you can use that word.
It is what it is. I mean, Jake Myers is not good, but
I would have put Dubon out there.
I would have been fine with that. But at the end of the day, let's go back and look at this. Like, this team offensively was not built to be a championship team this year. You came into the year making a huge bet that Chaz McCormick would be an 850 OPS guy again, right? That you were betting on that, playing him in left field and playing Jake Myers in center, hoping that he would replicate the season that he had last year, and he didn't come anywhere close to it. You're betting on Jake Myers being a quality major league center fielder, and while he's fine defensively, the guy's a 225 hitter realistically at the end of the day. He's Jake Marisnick part 2. You were banking on Jeremy Pena making a comeback to what he was his rookie year and not what he was last year. And while he showed flashes, he is what he is at this point, Scott, which is like a 260 hitter with little to no pop.
Yeah, and to me, if Jeremy Pena is your shortstop moving forward, I don't have an issue with that.
No.
Because you called him average. Well, average means that you have as many shortstops above you as you have below you.
And I think that's fair for him.
If you're 15th, 16th, 14th rated shortstop in Major League Baseball, that's not terrible. And you can't afford to put a top 5 player at every position. You just can't.
No.
So there's going to be some positions that you're just going to have to sit there and say, we're going to have to accept what this guy brings. To me, though, Jeremy Pena needs to be hitting 7th or 8th consistently.
Agree.
And you need to have 6 or 7 guys above him in the order that are better, more disciplined hitters.
I couldn't agree more.
And so to me, I think the key spots going forward, Chaz McCormick, I would have bet on him being a mid 700s guy, OPS. I think that would have been a reasonable bet. And obviously, he shit the bed this year. I don't think there's any other way of putting it. Jake Myers is the exact same offensive player he was in 2023, almost exactly the same. So you got to start looking around. You got to start, when you're in this offseason, you have to sit there and say, this lineup needs to be deeper and it needs to be more patient. So my second question is, in addition to those open holes, we really need to start talking about Alex Cintron. Is
Yeah,
this the hitting coach that we need right now?
I don't
Because
think so.
there are so many guys who, in terms of plate discipline, regressed this year. Regressed. Alex Bregman had the lowest walk rate of his career. Jeremy Pena's never been a walk guy. I mean, I guess Diaz walked more than he did in his rookie year, but I mean, that's because you can't walk less than he did during his rookie year. And the other guys, I mean, Alvarez, when healthy, he walks a lot. Tucker, when healthy, walks a lot. Altuve's never been a walk guy. Singleton, when he plays, walks a lot, but he also Ks a lot. So you're looking at a team that is set up to where you don't have a lot of patient guys. But in those games when you're facing a Scooble, you need to get his ass out in the sixth inning by working counts, fouling off pitches, making that pitch count go up. Because I agree, if you're going to sit there and say Scooble had our number, you know what? He's going to have 95% of the teams, he's going to have their number because he's the Cy Young winner, and deservedly so. But the point is that you've got to get to that middle relief somehow. You can't sit in there looking up at the sixth inning and have a guy with 70 pitches. I mean, that's insane. He's got to be up to that 90, 100 pitch mark. You got to be chasing his ass. That's how you win games like that.
No, I couldn't agree more. And if you look back to when this dynasty was truly beginning and we were at our height, that's what the Astros did so well. They were a patient team. They took their walk. They knew the next guy behind them had their back, and they chased starters early, and then they beat the shit out of your bullpen, right? And if you think back to 2015, this team is young. They've got a lot of, three true outcome style players. Colby Rasmus is having a career year hitting bombs. It's a fun team to watch, but they struck out a lot. And then that bit them in the ass in 2016 where they could not do what you're asking them to do right now, right? Well, what did they do? They made changes. They got guys in here that were more consistent hitters. And when they had those issues again in 2018, what did they do? They went and got Michael Brantley, who is the epitome of a fucking professional hitter who knows how to work a count, who knows how to do the things that this team was missing. Well, that's what it's time to do. Right? It's time to bring in those free agents and get rid of Alex Cintrone. Let's get Michael motherfucking Brantley on the phone and say, hey, guy, I got a job for you. And it's to take that professional hitter mentality and take it to everybody. Because let me give you something here, Scott. Here's some of the free agents that are available right now that I think are realistic targets for the Houston Astros. First base, Christian Walker would be an unbelievably good signing for the Houston Astros. Third base, you obviously want to try and bring back Bregman. Would be the ideal situation. I think Altuve made it pretty clear today that he is going to make his case to Jim Crane. We'll see if it actually happens or not. Then in the outfield, I want you to pick one of these three guys, knowing that you're spending theoretically on Christian Walker and Alex Bregman. Lourdes Gurriel has an opt-out, Jurickson Profar, or Jock Peterson.
Between those three, I'd go Jock Peterson as a more patient hitter. But you mentioned Altuve with Bregman. That's going to cost you. Christian Walker, I might, if they sign him, I might strip down naked and run down my street, screaming. But, you could get a guy, if you wanted to go cheaper, you could go Paul Goldschmidt if he's willing to come cheaper. I know he's on the downside, but again, you got to be smart and you got to sign these guys to a 1-year deal. I'll give you another name if he could play left field or, share with Jordan. I think JD Martinez is a free agent. That's tough but Jock Peterson's also a DH type. So that's
but he'll play the outfield for you, though.
He'll play the outfield. To me, between those three guys you mentioned, I like Peterson because at least he'll take a walk.
275 hitter this year, 23 homers. Was a platoonish type player, 101 hits and 367 at bats. I mean, the guy has pop. His OPS was 908 this year. He's been above 750 for the last 3 straight seasons. Not going to be terribly expensive. I would take Jock Peterson in a heartbeat in left field because here's the thing, Scott. We were fucking excited that Dana Brown brought in Jason Hayward at one point this season. I tipped my cap to Dana Brown for getting Jason Hayward in here. You know what? Jason Hayward had a big hit and a big catch, and he helped win the division. But at the end of the day, that's the guy that we were excited about because that's how bad left field had been.
Yeah, and I wouldn't mind him being back in some capacity either.
If that's my fifth outfielder, okay.
Well, as a fourth outfielder, as a guy that can play right and left, maybe some center. But, another name I'd throw out at you is Jesse Winker, as a kind of a lower budget guy. If you're going to be committing major dollars to Christian Walker, and if you did commit major dollars to Christian Walker, I think that would be a smarter move than committing major dollars to Jose Abreu. I think Walker, I want to say, is like, 32, 33?
I think so.
So, I mean, that's, you sign him to like a 3-year deal. I think that would be reasonable. I think bringing in somebody like a Jock Peterson on a 1-year deal would be reasonable. And if you brought back a Hayward as a guy of, hey, we're just going to keep you on the bench just in case, something shitty happens and we lose somebody. Or is Jock Peterson left or right-handed?
Lefty.
Shit. Well, never mind. I was going to say platoon him, but obviously Tucker's also left-handed, so that's unfortunately. But if you could scour, I don't know if Winker's right-handed. Maybe you could bring in both of those guys, for the cost of one, bona fide everyday player.
I don't know. I mean, Jock doesn't hit lefties well. He pretty much only plays against righties.
Because if you brought in Winker maybe to play lefties, who could also play right field and also DH, maybe you could give him a first baseman's glove and say, let's hit ground balls to you. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, he's an interesting guy. There's a lot out there. But again, I think you have to change the approach. Altuve, when he won his MVP, realized that if I, in certain counts, am only looking for the ball over this portion of the plate, I'm able to drive it. I'm able to do a little bit more with the baseball. He's back to the free swinging Altuve that came up as a rookie, right? Like the approach the last 2 years has really not been good. Cintrone is fun to watch. He's fiery, good for a few ejections a year, yells from the dugout. But at the end of the day, I think you and I both agree, and we've bemoaned this for the entire season, the boom or bust shit gets old. Like, I feel like the Astros have a certain allotment of runs per week, and they like to save them all for like 2 total games. And the other days, it's like we can do one. It's like one of those grids where it's like build your team for a total number of dollars, and you can choose to spend high on the quarterback or you can go $3 on everyone. I'd rather score 4 or 5 runs every game than 12 in one, 1 in another, 8 in one, 0 in another. That's not consistent, right? That's not good winning baseball. And it's tough. It's tough, right? Because if you look at from 2017 to where we are now, right? Like, you've lost Correa, you've lost you've lost Springer, you've lost Michael Brantley, you've lost your Gurriel, you've lost McCann, who whatever. I think Yiner's better, but at the end of the day, you lost a collection of pretty good professional hitters who worked counts. Correa very rarely got cheated in a bat. Whether he's the same player or not now, you didn't replace that player on this roster.
No, and I think what we're looking at with Alex Cintrone is nobody knows what he's telling the guys. But obviously, whatever he's telling them, I don't know. Do you think he's telling them to do this? Because if he is, I got to question his sanity. So what I'm thinking is that you got a mix of veterans who are probably thinking like, fuck you, I'm going to do what I want. And you got these young players who don't necessarily know any better. So you mentioned the name Michael Brantley. That's a guy with cachet. That's a guy who has pelts on the wall. That's a guy who he could sit there and say, listen, I was a fucking all-star. I knew how to hit. You're going to fucking listen to me. That's a guy that can do that. Now, the only other guy that could come anywhere close to that who actually did it is Jeff Bagwell, who did it for maybe like a year. But that's a bit. That's, to me, there's no other guy. You can't be hiring these guys. Like, the fact that this team once hired Harry Spillman as a hitting coach, I still find hilarious.
I mean,
don't
I
know
think there's a few guys like let's be realistic. If you wanted to go through Astros royalty, right? I think if Lance Berkman walked in the room and said, "I'm your new hitting coach, listen up."
Yeah. I just don't know.
Yeah. I think if Craig Biggio walked in the room and said, "I got 3,060 of these motherfucking hits right here, listen up, bitches," everybody's listening. Or like when the Miami Marlins hired Barry Bonds, right? Like, who the fuck is going to argue with Barry Bonds when it comes to hitting? And if you do, you're wrong because you're arguing with Barry Bonds.
Yeah, I don't know if those two guys would want to do it. I don't know.
Lance would be one of them. Lance was a manager for HBU. Like, clearly he's interested in being in the clubhouse.
Yeah, Biggio was a manager at St. Thomas High School, but
that was when his son was playing.
Yeah,
there. Like Lance legitimately looked like he wanted to get into coaching and building a program. I mean, we're looking at one of the best switch hitters to ever play the game, at least from a power perspective, right? And that you can coach both sides of the plate if you're.
I've never understood that. I've never understood. So you're not young. You're not old enough to remember Harry Spillman as a player.
I don't.
Harry Spillman was a utility guy in the 80s. Before this team was good. I mean, he could not break the regular lineup when this team sucked. He was like a 220 hitter with no power. I'm not listening to that motherfucker tell me how to hit.
Okay, so let me give you a list that if we're gonna go that way, let me give you a list of some of the worst possible candidates from Astros history that we can go with as hitting candidates. Let's go back and forth and see here. I will start with one, Adam Everett as your hitting coach.
I'll see your Adam Everett. I'm gonna go. I'll go Brad Ausmus as a hitting coach.
It's a great choice. Chris Carter.
Oh, you're hurting me now. I'll go back in the past. I'll go John Mayberry.
Brett Wallace.
I just remember watching him drink a Red Bull in the clubhouse, during a rain delay, and they're showing him on camera, and I'm like, oh god. Remember Brett Wallace as a shortstop?
Yeah, he tried it. He tried it out. We can give you Chris Coast if you really want to get crazy with it. Maybe Ricky Gutierrez could come in. Maybe Tim Bogar could help us out a little bit.
Andujar Cedeno.
Maybe Ronnie Cedeno. We'll get the whole Cedeno family in here. Maybe if we want someone who's actually got some hitter talent, but would have a little trouble getting people to pay attention to him because he's fucking batshit crazy, Carl Everett. I think could be a fun guy as a coach.
Okay, here we go.
Spaceman.
Here we go. Mitch Molesky.
I was thinking that one. He had a good year though. Mitch Molesky could swing the stick a little bit.
He's a crazy. Nobody would respect him. All right.
So if you really want to go that direction, let's just go Aubrey Huff and just fucking take the full heel turn.
I'm coming, this motherfucking red hat.
Hey, Aubrey, actually, we did a uniform change. We don't wear the brick red anymore. I know you were here a long time ago. This fucking colors don't run, baby.
I'm going to wear my MAGA hat on the diamond. You're just not going to do it.
It just says, make Houston hit again. It's just...
MHHA.
All right, Scott. Let's switch it up a little bit. Some good news. The Houston Texans back on the winning ways. It was ugly. It was the opposite of clean. It was dirty. Not dirty as far as, playing dirty, but there was a ton of penalties, a lot of laundry on the field. But yet, when winning time happened, CJ Stroud found a way to drive this team down the field and hit our backup kicker with a wonderful pass to put us into the promised land.
So I'm gonna give a little mini hat tip. We were taking the trip to TCU this Sunday and Monday for a college visit. I'm not hat tipping them because their price tag went up to $81,000. That doesn't deserve a hat tip. But to XM, I listened to the Texans game on XM the whole way up. So, didn't lose signal. Um, and I listened to the Detroit and Seattle Monday Night Football game on the way back. Just kept me awake, kept me engaged. So we gained about 430 yards total offense. How many points did we score, Tim?
24? Was it 24-20 was the final score?
24-20, right? The Lions gained about 420 yards total offense. How many points did they score on Monday night?
42, I think it was.
45.
45.
So what does that tell you?
It tells me a combination of things. The Lions forced more turnovers than we did, or had better field position to start, and they didn't shoot themselves in the foot because they played cleaner football.
Yeah, we're running out of toes. That's what it's telling me. But I will give a hat tip to the defense. We won the game 24-13 if you're just looking at the defense. I mean, a muff punt recovered on our 2. I mean, that's a touchdown. I mean, that's effectively a touchdown. So goal line stand in the second half, absolutely huge. 2 3-and-outs in the fourth quarter, absolutely huge. That gives Stroud the opportunity to win the game. So I'm going to give the defense a hat tip on that one.
No, the defense has continued to be good.
I mean,
the offense has not done enough, right? Even when the defense gets torched a little bit, it's because the offense goes 3 and out because you get so many fucking penalties that it's 3rd and 20 all the time. I'd like to know. I know we don't have it in front of us, but realistically, I'd like to know how many times have the Texans faced 3rd and 15 or longer this season? Because it seems like all the time.
Yeah, if I had more time and I was going to think about it, I was going to run through the one drive where I want to say we committed 4 penalties and overcame like 2 3rd and longs, only to have Laramie Tunsil, who we'll get to later, kill the drive with yet another holding penalty. And so we started the drive from our own 1, went down to as far as the Jacksonville 32 with, I think, 30 yards of penalties on that one. So the Texans gained, I think, 97 yards on the drive and come away with 0 points.
It's outrageous. Like I feel like for the longest time we've given Tunsil a pass. Like he gets a false start here or there, but he keeps our quarterback upright, right? Like he keeps him clean. He's the best left tackle in the league. Yeah, he jumps, but it's not that big a deal. But now it's becoming a pretty huge deal because at the end of the day, you're impeding drives. You are continually wiping big plays out with holds, with illegal formations, with false starts, with whatever it is that you're doing. You're bringing the ball back further and further every single time we get a big chunk gain down the field.
And you look at this team and you look at the offensive line and you're looking at, you have 2 young guys. You have Kenyon Green, you've got Juice Scruggs. I think they've committed maybe 2 penalties all year. In that game, you've got Tunsil committing penalties. You got Shaq Mason committing like 2 penalties. That's a guy with multiple Super Bowl rings. These are your veterans. These are the guys that are supposed to set the tone. I just don't get it.
I don't understand it as well, but thank goodness, like you said, for the defense. Thank goodness for CJ Stroud. And I saw a tweet and it pissed people off, but they're idiots. Nico Collins is underpaid, right? Like when you look at how much these top wide receivers are making right now, that deal looks even better.
Oh yeah. I mean, the fact that teams have to know he's the guy and they still can't stop him. Yeah. Diggs played well. I thought, Diggs had a really good game. He's not, peak Buffalo Diggs, but I don't think anybody expected that.
But I think it's becoming clear we don't need him to be that guy, right?
Yeah,
like,
no.
He is exactly the kind of receiver. He is a better Robert Woods, right? He's a great possession receiver who can do more than just get 5 yards on 3rd down, but he's not the over-the-top burner that he once was.
Right. And then, of course, you didn't have Tank Dell in this game. You didn't have Joe Mixon or Damian Pierce in this game. But you still found the way to move the football. So, I mean, I think mostly it's promising if we can find just a way to clean up this crap.
No, I completely agree with you. And you've got a team as we move on, waiting for us in the Bills, right? That um, can put some points on the board, and they can do it in a hurry. We saw them embarrass the same Jacksonville team that the Texans kind of struggled with. I'm not necessarily worried about the Bills scoring a ton of points, but I am worried about the Texans having enough clean drives to keep up with the points the Bills do score.
Yeah, what worries me about our 3 wins versus our 1 loss and then what's coming up with this opponent is that you can look at points in those 3 games where the quarterbacks just absolutely missed open guys. Like, to me, if I were in Jacksonville right now, there would be a very open conversation about what the hell's up with Trevor Lawrence. So that, that's number 1. Of course, I don't know if we're going to have that conversation, but basically the concern is with Josh Allen moving forward is that Josh Allen legitimately, I think, is one of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks in football. I don't think it's really a particular debate at this point. I think the only people that would debate it would be people who would say he's not won the big game. He's not been able to get by Patrick Mahomes. But I think if you look at the performances, particularly last year and then that, 1 year that they did make it to the AFC Championship game, he balled out. He absolutely balled out. And then there's no, and the problem is that you're looking at a quarterback who, number 1, is not going to miss wide open targets like these other 3 quarterbacks that the Texans have beat so far on the year. And number 2 is a guy that definitely can beat you with his legs. And I think as a runner, I don't know if it'd be an interesting debate, when Tim gets back, but, is he a better runner than Anthony Richardson, who, we beat in week 1? I mean, there's definitely, especially around the goal line, you can make that argument that, Josh Allen is, the single best threat, throwing or rushing the football. I mean, Lamar Jackson fans obviously are going to have a lot to say about that as well. But I think what is happened with that team is you got an OC and Joe Brady who's figured out that Josh Allen is the focal point of the offense. And so if we put the ball in Josh Allen's hands, that if we set up enough of a run game with James Jackson, that we can basically move the ball at will, because now Josh Allen is not having to throw the ball to Stephon Diggs. He's got a good tight end that he could throw the ball to. He's got a couple of young wide receivers, who are not, household names that he can throw the ball to. He's got backs out of the backfield he can throw the ball to. He can pull it down. He can run with it. And so what they've basically done is they basically said, we're going to let Josh Allen lead the way. Now, the Ravens have a better defense than most teams. And so the Ravens were able to shut that down. But basically what they did is they took away the run game. And so they said, okay, Josh Allen, you're going to have to put on your Superman cape and you're going to have to do it by yourself. I don't know if anybody in the NFL is capable of doing that. Maybe Patrick Mahomes, but maybe that's the only guy. So if the Texans are going to win on Sunday, at least defensively, the only way they're going to be able to do it is they got to make them one-dimensional. They're going to have, rest all on Josh Allen's arm, and hope that Kamari Laster, hoping that Derek Stingley Jr. they show up, ball out, and cover those wide receivers and lock them down. And then hoping that maybe a Jalen Petrie, for instance, can get on Dalton Kincaid and can shut him down, or at least slow him down to the point where the only thing you really would have to worry about at that point is Josh Allen running the football. Now, on defense, I don't know if Tim saw this, but I'll get to it when he gets back. Von Miller has been suspended by the NFL for personal conduct for 4 games. I think that comes at a really nice time. It's taken away a key pass rusher away from the Buffalo defense. And so the key is that, we got to keep Stroud upright. Hopefully Joe Mixon and or Damian Pierce can come back, can give this team a little bit more of a running attack, but also, maybe Tank Dell can come back. Maybe he can, come back and give this team that third wide receiver that it just becomes really difficult for, opposing teams to guard. Because I think, what Stroud has shown is that if he's given time to throw, he's going to find one of those guys. I think the teams that have beaten him, which is right now the Vikings and the Bears defense, I think as well. I think they did so because they were able to apply pressure. They were able to take away the running game, and they were able to apply pressure on Stroud and hurry him into, some bad throws. Some of those, particularly in the Vikings game, turned into picks. These things are going to happen to every quarterback in the NFL, no matter what your name is. If you've got particularly pressure coming at you up the middle, through your center and through your guards, there's very little the quarterback's going to be able to do. You can flush them out, you can make some occasional plays, but those defenses have also been able to swallow up Stroud and sack him more than occasionally. I mean, right now, the Texans, even after allowing just 2 sacks, are on pace to allow the second most sacks that they've allowed in franchise history after that 2002 squad that had David Carr being sacked 73 times. And I think, everybody in Houston who's been alive for that long knows what happened to David Carr's career. I think he's still seeing the ghost of pass rushers, and he's in the NFL's film studio, or an NFL Network studio. So I think the key is it's going to be the offensive line, and so we're going to have to clean up some of those penalties, and we're just going to have to make sure that we're at least slowing down the pass rush just enough to give Stroud some time to connect with some of those targets. I think, we saw, I think we still got 2 good tight ends. I think Dalton Schultz had a couple of catches, but, he hasn't really been heard from much this year. Kate Stover is a good looking tight end. I think is going to have, a future in this offense, after probably a year to adjust, but he's made a few good plays here on the season. Daria Gabuawe, obviously had a big game, had the touchdown at the end, but also had a key third down when we were backed up because of those penalties, where he was able to run from a short catch for a first down. So I think there are plenty of targets coming back and forth. So as I was telling the listeners, Tim, I don't know if you saw this, but Von Miller has been suspended for 4 games
I
due
did
to
see
the
that.
personal conduct policy. So hopefully that's going to take a little bit of luster off of the Buffalo's pass rush.
And just before we move on, Scott, there's been some scuttlebutt, or reporters specifically asked Doug Peterson if he lost their locker room, and of course he answered no. But I do want to ask you: do you think Doug Peterson has lost the locker room in Jacksonville?
Did he have it?
Well, I mean, they were a playoff team 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Fell off last year, and now this year have started 0-4, and Trevor Lawrence looks awful.
He's lost his last 9 starts.
Yeah.
I think the problem with Trevor Lawrence, and I didn't really talk much about him while you were gone, so this is kind of new conversation, is that I think he is somewhere probably in the 15 to 20 rank as a quarterback. I think he's a guy that if you surrounded him with a lot of talent and you put a good system in place, he can succeed. So, but let me put it to you this way, Tim. Would you rather have him or Sam Darnold?
Right now, Sam Darnold.
But I mean, doesn't the fact that you have to hesitate kind of tell you, where we are at this point?
No,
because
absolutely.
He's one of the 5 highest paid quarterbacks in football.
Number 1 overall pick.
Well, and if you listen to the game, I didn't watch the game, but to listen to the game, I could count probably on more than one hand listening to Mark Vanderbeer talk about, that wide receiver was wide open, but Lawrence just couldn't get him the ball. How many times do you think that happens to Stroud?
1 to 2 a game, maybe?
Yeah. How many times does that happen to Josh Allen?
I think every quarterback has 1 or 2 a game, but that's the good quarterbacks.
That's not happening a half dozen times. But you look at this team, in this defense, the only thing that concerns me is that if you put Caleb Williams, Anthony Richardson, and Trevor Lawrence into the same box, the box is that those guys miss some wide open throws that probably bail this defense out.
No, I agree. There's some coverage issues, and I think that they've gotten a little bit better. But yeah, last week some throws were missed. So we'll see what Josh Allen does. But let's move this thing on as we talk about our horse's ass of the week. Scott, who do you got for us?
Okay, I brought him up. Laramie Tunsil is absolutely a horse's ass. And so the character I'm gonna compare him to a character, Tim. And I'm gonna think of a scene in a movie. I'm not gonna list it, but you tell me. I'm gonna just give you the name of the character, and you tell me the scene I'm thinking. Roger Dorn.
Is it the one where he pisses all over the contract?
Yeah, it's like that. No, my contract says I don't have to do any calisthenics that I deem unnecessary. What do you think of that? This is a son of a bitch, Tunsil, who takes 2 days off a week, minimum. He didn't practice today. Didn't practice at all. Now, you could sit there and say, is he nursing an injury? Maybe, but this guy never practices. Like, he's taking at least 1 day off a week that the team is practicing. It's normal, customary in the NFL that you're taking Monday off. So everybody's getting Monday off. But this guy's taking additional in camp. He's taking days off. After the penalties in the Vikings game, he's sitting there blaming it on the center. He's blaming it on the officials. He's blaming it on everybody but himself. I haven't heard in his comments after this week, but I imagine it's maybe pretty much the same. And I have to sit there and say, I openly question whether Laramie Tunsil gives a shit. Maybe he does. Maybe. But to me, and I've coached teams. I've coached volleyball teams. Granted, not football, but I coached volleyball teams. My teams that were the best teams that I coached, the best player on that team was also the hardest worker on that team, because that's how you have to get it done. My teams that sucked, the teams that I hated coaching, were the teams where the best player knew they were the best player and said, "What? I'm not going to practice. What the hell are you going to do about it?" Those are the teams that I had were the worst teams.
When I was in high school on the golf team, my sophomore year, our best player was I don't want to call anybody out, but our best player was a guy who was that way. Knew he was the best player. His family was members at Bay Oaks, had been playing golf his whole life. Really didn't have to grind that hard. Well, you know what? By the time district rolled around sophomore year, he got caught by a kid who was my age, who was a sophomore, who went out and shot 2 or 3 under for district and won the whole damn thing because he grinded his ass off, because he was out there every single day trying to get better, while our guy who went in ranked number 1 skipped practice to go get drunk and smoke weed. Like, it is what it is, right? Like, live life, have fun, but don't expect to be the best person on your team for long, or don't expect your team to win if you're not willing to put the work in.
Well, there's that, but also, what would it have done for you if this guy would have been out there in front of everybody grinding his ass off? What kind of example would that have set for you?
No, it definitely would drive us crazy too as a team. We're like, why does this guy get to skip practice? Why does he get to do, whatever it was? And hey, it is what it is, right?
We had a golf coach who half the team went to Casa Ole during last period of day. I would say 7th period, but back we had a 6th period day. So at 1:30, they were like deuces, and they hung out at Casa Ole for like 2.5 hours because our coach didn't go out to the course. How good was our team? Not that good.
Yeah, same. Our worst year was my junior year, where all you had to do was tell Coach Tucker that you were going to tutorials, and he did not ask for any other follow-up, and then couldn't figure out why 3 of his top 5 players were failing classes, even though they were in, as he said, tutorials 3 days a week. It's like my mom's driving down the street and she's like, "Hey, that's 3 of your teammates drinking beer on the front stoop."
Those classes are hard, Tim.
Hey,
you got to cut them some slack.
I've got a 2-headed scumbag here, Scott. Let me do a minor one first.
Horse's ass.
I'm sorry, two-headed horse's ass here. Let me do a minor one first, and then we'll move to the main one. My minor one is going to be the owner of the Arizona Diamondbacks, Ken Kendrick, who blasts the signing of Jordan Montgomery for his $47.5 million contract, blaming himself for making the recommendation to the front office late in spring training. He said, looking back in hindsight, a horrible decision to have invested that money in a guy that performed as poorly as he did. It was or is the biggest mistake this season from a talent standpoint, and I'm the perpetrator of that. Montgomery's got a player option for next year with that team. I gotta think he's gonna take his talents. Well, it's for $22.5 million. I might say fuck you and take it. Who knows? Who knows, Scott? But for me, my main horse's ass is the Houston Astros offense. You completely shit the bed these two games, what literally were the two biggest games of the season. You scored one run, and it came in the ninth inning in game one. And I get it, as we've talked about, Scooball's going to win the Cy Young. He's fantastic. You went up there and swung freely and wildly and allowed him to get 7 innings of shutout baseball. Then today you did the same shit in a bullpen day, and you finally work it in your favor and get the bases loaded and nobody out, and you get 2 runs out of it, and then your bullpen goes and blows your most expensive bullpen pieces go and blow the lead in the 8th inning. And it's so frustrating because this team has got the arms, but the bats just never materialized the way the back of the baseball card numbers should have this season, Scott. For a team that had back of the card numbers the way they do, it just never worked out.
And we sang Dana Brown's praises last week, and he deserves praise for cobbling together a pitching staff.
Yeah,
on the year. But I think the one big whiff was at the deadline not picking up a bat.
Looking back on it now, absolutely. How did you not get a bat, especially knowing what they knew about Kyle Tucker being out as long as he did? I mean, we were rolling out Ben Gamble 5 days a week at one point this season. That was the state of this team. And then when Ben Gamble got hurt, you felt the need to go get Jason Hayward.
Well, you had both simultaneously for a while.
That is true. That is true. But, I mean, the point being, this offense just never clicked. And, I don't know if it's Cintrone. I don't know if it's just the collection of losses over this year, right? How many key pieces walking away can you sustain before it finally tilts the other direction? I don't know. But the offensive mentality, you mentioned it earlier, it's not a championship mentality. You have to be more comfortable hitting with 2 strikes than they have been. You have to be more comfortable hitting from behind an account. You have to be comfortable working a count. And you can't be up there thinking, I'm only going to get 1 pitch to hit. If it comes with the first pitch, that's it. I got to swing. Because that, to me, you mentioned you don't know what Cintrone's approach is. I don't think we know that. But it seems to me like he's one of those guys who truly believes you get a pitch to hit and a bat, don't miss it. And if it comes with the first pitch, that's fine. Swing at the first pitch. Whereas I'd love to go a whole game where hey, nobody swing at the first pitch tonight. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, we don't know what his message is. We know that they're probably not listening. And if that's the case, you still got to fire him. And if this is his message, you have to fire him.
Yeah, I think, Espada being a first-year manager, he wanted some sort of institutional awareness of you don't want to rock the boat overnight. But hey, this is your staff. You need to make the changes. And at the end of the day, this offense was just never good enough all season. They didn't score runs early in the year. They had some high points, but this team got to where it was because your starting pitching went to an elite level. That is why you made the playoffs. It is nothing to do with any bat on this roster. Yainer had a good month. Jordan had a good month, things of that nature. But again, you never had a truly fluid offensive team at any point this year.
But I would go back, and this is where, go back to your memory banks, Tim. Let's go back to when this team was its most successful 2022 playoff run. Why did this team roll through the playoffs?
The bullpen. Or the pitching in
And the
general.
pitchings in general, right? I mean, we're talking about a no fucking hitter in the World Series. I
But
mean,
you
that
still
hasn't
had to
happened.
score at least one run to win that game.
Yeah, but that hasn't happened since 1956.
But
So,
no, you had to score enough though to give the bullpen a
but,
lead, and this team
but
can't
my
even do that.
but the point is, you look at the moments that you're thinking of this team, right? And I'm thinking of the Mariners series. Your offense does shit for 8 innings, and then Jordan puts on the Superman cape and wins game 1 for you. Okay, thank you, Jordan. Then you go into Seattle, and you're playing to a 0-0 tie for, what was it, 47 innings? I lost count after a while. And you win 1-0 on a Pena bomb. Your offense did not win you that World Series. There's no way you would ever convince me of that. So even when this team was at its very best, it wasn't the offense. Alex Centrone has never been a good hitting coach.
You're right. I mean, you're right. But if you look at the 2017 team,
Oh, sure. Yeah, that was a good
that
job.
was an offensive win, right? You had a 13-12 as a
Oh,
final
sure.
one of those
Oh,
games.
yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like there's got to be some sort of happy medium because if you look on paper, at least the pitching staff for this team coming back next year should be damn close to elite again, right? Like I think Hader probably is maybe a little better next year. He was one of those guys who had a shortened spring training, joining the team a little late, maybe late in his process in February. And it took him a little bit to get settled into his new home where I feel like he's going to have a full offseason in Houston. It'll probably go better next year.
I hope so.
Abreu, I think he kind of goes every other year. So I'm expecting a bounce back for Abreu. I'd like to see Ort back again next year. We saw some good young arms, Ferguson, maybe, King.
Even that guy Sean Dubin looked good.
Dubin. But the long story short, right? Like the pitching staff's okay. You don't have to go re-sign Kikuchi, but I would like to because of what you gave up theoretically with the young starting pitching to go get him, and maybe Will Wagner because now you don't have a third baseman next year if you don't go get Bregman. Whatever. I think Kikuchi has had his. And this is where you and I have talked before too about being a good agent for a player. If I'm Kikuchi's agent, I look at him and say, I'm going to try and get us back here. We may take a little bit less money, but you literally, even if it's only a 1-year deal, you pitch better here than you have anywhere else in your entire career ever. I think we need to be here another year at least. That's what I'm telling my client. I'll take a little bit less to keep you in Houston because you pitch better here.
Yeah, absolutely. The only question is going to be is that you mentioned some names. Can you afford Christian Walker, Alex Bregman, Jock Peterson, and Kikuchi?
I mean, that's a Jim Crane question. We can afford it, right? Is he willing to open the book? Are any of these players willing to maybe accept some of those delayed money deals that the Los Angeles Dodgers have found ways to make work through the last year and a half? Can we defer some money down the line? I don't know. Maybe Kyle Tucker can take like a big time deferred money deal. I don't know. We can get some. This podcast will sponsor Kyle Tucker for $1 a year.
Could you imagine? Well, could you imagine? 2,100, and here comes Tucker's like aging grandchildren to collect the Tucker check.
That'd be hilarious. Like Kyle Tucker the sixth is now here to pick up the next $1 million check. Like at some point, right? Like Denise Bonillo, whoever his daughter is going to go picking up that check. So like, yeah, it'd be hilarious if like Jackson Tucker with an X is the one who goes and gets it. All right, Scott, let's switch it up. Let's talk some positive things here. There's, it's been a frustrating week, but we can talk positive stuff too. What do you got for a hat tip of the cap this week?
I think you and I agreed on 2 guys. So I'll take one, you take the other. I think that's, and I think both of us agreed that both of these guys deserve absolute hat tips. Mine will go local. Justin Verlander. I think that there's a 99% chance he's thrown his last pitch as an Astro. I think you'd agree with me on that one. I think there's probably a better than 50% chance he may have thrown his last pitch, period. I think he may hang it up. Maybe not. We'll see. But what does this guy do? He comes back. He admits that maybe I come back a little bit too early. And so he really struggled down the stretch. He fought hard. I remember, I can't remember who we got the victory against, where he got to 4 2/3 innings and just couldn't get out of the fifth. So they couldn't get him the win. But in his last outing, he looked shaky in the early going. He certainly did. Gave up 3 runs fairly early on. But that guy gutted it out. He goes 6 innings, 3 runs, wins his last outing as an Astro. I got to tip my cap to you because, as Tim has stated on past episodes, he absolutely changed the trajectory of this organization.
You don't win the 2017 World Series without him.
No, you don't. And you probably don't win any other ones. And so you can thank him for 2 trophies, because I certainly think in 2022, he's coming back from Tommy John with a 1.75 ERA. 1.75 ERA. That's just ridiculously, that's just stupid good. I mean, that's like Bob Gibson, like good. Coming back from Tommy John surgery. I mean, it's just 3 Cy Youngs, an American League MVP to boot. Not one of the better World Series pitching resumes in history, only 1 World Series victory, but overall postseason resume is pretty damn good. I think he's second all time to Andy Pettitte in postseason wins. So all around good guy. And to put the cherry on this ice cream sundae, he told Joe Espada, he told Dana Brown, you don't have to put me on the postseason roster. I haven't earned it. You don't have to put me there. And that's a guy who at 40 could have said, I'm the best pitcher alive right now, active in the game. You put me on you give me the ball in game 1. He could have been that guy, but he wasn't. And that's because, JV's a good guy.
Yeah, I will forever love Justin Verlander. I don't know if it's the correct, but I think the argument can be made that he is, for his time as an Astro, the best Astros pitcher we've ever had. I'm not saying he is. I think it's between him and Nolan. But I wouldn't disrespect you if you told me that Justin Verlander's time in Houston is the greatest run a Houston pitcher has ever had. Because up until this year, like, you pretty much guarantee a win if Justin Verlander is pitching, at least during the regular season, right? Like, it was JV day, it was on, let's go. Guy's going to give us 6 or 7 innings of 1 or 2 run baseball, and it was awesome. And as I mentioned numerous times on this show, changed the trajectory of the Houston Astros twice, right? You went and traded for him in 2022. You brought him back, and in 2023. And again, he took a team that needed that little boost and brought us to the ALCS last year. And I think if this is the final moment of his career, it sucks with the Astros at least. But again, just to show who Justin Verlander was or is, Hunter Brown grew up idolizing this guy. And what is at this point the biggest start in Hunter Brown's career, who does he go sit next to in between innings and talk and make sure that he's doing everything right? Justin Verlander. 6 innings and 1 run, 6+ innings and 1 run baseball for Hunter Brown today. And he was sitting next to his guy the whole way, getting coached through it. So another guy that I think you and I talked a couple weeks ago, and I didn't think he was maybe a candidate for a coaching kind of role. But after seeing this side of Verlander over the last 2 weeks, especially going back to the on-air interviews they had of him after they clinched the AL West, I maybe wonder if he does get into a pitching coach type role at some point in his life.
I think so. And I think if he were willing to go down to the minor leagues, could you imagine being a minor league pitcher and having Justin Verlander tell you things?
Could you imagine how good and how prepared these guys would be when they came up?
I mean, you wouldn't. Nobody's telling that guy to fuck off.
Yeah.
I mean, he's going in the Hall of Fame.
3 no-hitters for JV. Obviously, the one in Houston. Where the fuck is Toro? Cy Young here. 2 World Series. JV, I love you, man. And if this was it, fuck, you were awesome, man. And I would take him back on a cheap deal next year, but I got to think a team like the Tigers, who's desperate for starting pitching and needs a veteran, could throw a lot more money
Yeah.
at him than we could.
Yeah.
I mean, the Tigers have one starter, and then everything else is all bullpen stuff.
Yeah. All right, Tim, I left you a big tip of the cap open for you.
Yeah, and I'm going to tip my tap to a guy that, let's be honest, Scott, you and I should have been talking about more this year. We are, so students of the game. Like, yes, we love the Houston Astros, but something historic happened this year. Ohtani completed the 50-50 season with home runs as the 50 and not doubles as Craig Biggio once did. This was a 50 home run, 50 stolen base season, which has never been done before. And I think it was a big miss on our part to not comment as it was going on. We really didn't hat tip Ohtani, I don't think at any point during the year. But I'm going to do it now because he signed the huge deal this offseason. He is not going to pitch. He then gets the whole gambling thing happen all before the season even starts. And he still is able to respond and come back with what is arguably one of the top 5 offensive seasons of all time.
Yeah. Well, and always hate these cheapies, like when you go 40-40, because like when Jose Canseco was the first guy to do it, he did it with like 41 home runs and 40 steals. This is a guy that hit like 54 or 55 home runs.
Yeah.
And 59 steals, which actually broke Ichiro's record for the most steals by a Japanese player in the born player in the major leagues. So you could make an argument that Aaron Judge is a better overall hitter. Aaron Judge hits for a higher average, gets on base more often, hit more dingers, drove in more runs. You can make that argument. But the fact that this guy got paid, again, one of those delayed deals, $700 million over 10 years, and absolutely delivered every dime. Every dime. I don't know that you could say that he's overpaid based on, what he did on the field. Particularly, you can't say he's overpaid probably based on the merchandising that, the Dodgers were able to do off of him. So, I mean, it's rare for somebody with that exorbitant a contract to live up to it.
And again, only did half of what he normally does, right? Because he's also a Cy Young level starter who can throw 100 miles an hour. So this isn't even Final Four Ohtani, right? Like next year he could hit like this and start every 5th day. So, man, great season, Shohei. Not that you're going to hear this, but I tip my cap to you, man.
Absolutely. Well, you don't ever know. He may listen in. I don't
Maybe.
know. Maybe his interpreter will listen in and just kind of pass it along.
Could you imagine how intense the background check was for interpreter number 2? Like after everything that's happened, like obviously he still needs an interpreter, right? So they're like, we got to find somebody, but we're gonna bring the FBI in. We're gonna,
Secret
fingerprint,
Service.
DNA. Give me a bit of your blood. Spit in this tube.
Oh man. Okay.
All right, Scott. Let's take a look. Somebody somewhere has pissed us off, and they need to be recognized as scumbags of the week. Who do you got for us, Scott?
Well, I would go based on last night's performance. I would normally go JD Vance, but basically, nothing he did surprised me. He's a smooth talking bullshit artist. That's what he is. And to me, the 3 things I learned last night was that number 1, his mom's a drug hoe. Had maybe a few problems with the crack pipe, maybe more than a few. We learned that because he mentioned it about maybe 4 or 5 times. Number 2, that Kamala Harris and her administration hasn't accomplished nearly enough. And she's had 3.5 years to do it as vice president. And number 3, he seems to remember the Trump 4 years a little bit differently than I would say most of us remember it. But I wouldn't expect anything different. And so my scumbag is going to be basically mainstream media and everything we're doing with debates, because they set it up to where, and I looked at the poll numbers, it was about 50-50 split as to who won the debate last night. Because particularly your undecided voters, they don't know shit. They don't know that J.D. Vance is lying his ass off, mainly because they had an agreement beforehand that we're going to fact check him. And then J.D. Vance, in his moment when he was fact checked, just in a very minimal way, well, we agreed there would be no fact checking. I mean, what kind of dipshit says that? I mean, I don't know if that makes him a scumbag as much as it makes him just a dumbass. But we've been doing debates like this for years. We've been allowing politicians to lie their asses off without anybody saying like, nope, that's not it. Or, that wasn't my question, douchebag. Okay, this was my question. Answer it. It's just political theater at this point. And if you're an undecided voter on October 2nd, God help you. I don't know. I don't know what to say about you if you're really, truly undecided, because, if you've lived in this country the last 9 years, you have to know what's going on. I mean, and to me, the Trump voters don't piss me off nearly as much as people who say they're undecided. It's like, what the fuck? I mean, at least if you want to sit there and say I'm a douchebag asshole, at least own it. I mean, I get it. Some people are assholes. That's what their brand. J.D. Vance is an asshole. That's his brand. He's a smooth talking asshole, but he's an asshole. And so I would call him a scumbag, but I've already done that. What was it, 3 weeks in a row or 2 weeks in a row?
I think it was 3. He narrowly avoided the golden sombrero last week.
So I'm not giving it to J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance came out with the performance I thought he would. He didn't surprise me. So I'm giving it to mainstream media for just the way we set these debates up.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. And, some people are assholes. And I realized I got one living down the street from me, okay? This person proudly has the Trump Vance sign out front in their yard. And like you said, at this point, if you're a Trumper, I get it. I think you're a fucking asshole, but I get it. But you want to know what makes him a real asshole, Scott, in my opinion? The fact that yesterday they added a Ted Cruz for Texas sign to their front yard.
Oh.
Who the fuck is putting up Ted Cruz signs? Like, I don't mentally understand the Trumpers, but like, I get it, right? You've made your decision. But no one's fucking putting out signs in their yard for Ted Cruz.
I saw the commercial last night for the first time where they had a guy dressed as Colin Allred tackling a girl on a soccer field. And I'm 50 years old, Tim. My capacity to be shocked and appalled is pretty high. When I saw that ad, I was like, what the fuck was that?
How is that not slander? Or how is that not like libelous material? You are showing this man tackling women.
I just don't know. I mean, I guess maybe they could come back and say, well, we're not saying it was Colin Allred. We're saying it was the guy that had his jersey that liked him. Maybe that's where they're going with that with defense. But to call that high-minded debate is just, I mean, I talked about Ted Cruz last week. I can't get on the Ted Cruz thing again because it's the same thing.
We'll get off. I was just saying, you're an asshole, is all I'm saying. But my scumbag this week, Scott, I also was appalled by J.D. Vance last night. But I also am like you. I don't want to give him the credit. So my scumbag this week is going to be the man responsible for why we're having to even watch J.D. Vance in a vice presidential debate, and that's Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel is the former CEO of PayPal who cashed out, and he is one of those guys who thinks because he was good at one thing, creating PayPal, he should rule the fucking world. And he met J.D. Vance as a very young law student, and he has funded every bit of J.D. Vance's life alongside with the political theorings of another crazy person who has been writing secretly on blogs for the longest time under the name Mencius Moldbug, his real name actually being Curtis Yarvin. Insane stuff that was completely funded by Peter Thiel because he truly thinks the rich people of Silicon Valley should rule the world. So he has spent millions and millions of dollars to make JD Vance somehow, somewhat, the tiniest little bit palatable so we can get him in office. This guy is a piece of shit. Peter Thiel controls way too much of the world. He's also a fucking idiot. He loves to name things after Lord of the Rings when I guarantee you J.R. Tolkien would fucking hate him. Like, he's a fascist. The whole purpose of Lord of the Rings was fighting fascism, and this dude names his company after the crystal ball in Lord of the Rings, Palantir, not understanding the fucking point of Lord of the Rings. Come on, Peter. You're a fucking scumbag.
I want to go back to your other guy.
Curtis Yarvin?
Yes.
I
So,
introduced you to his theories the other day.
well, and I listened to Rachel Maddow, and she did a pretty long segment on him. And my favorite quote, I'm not gonna get it exactly right, but basically, the American people's got to get over their anti-dictatorial, bent. I don't know if you remember that quote. Maybe you can clean
He
that up
wants,
for me.
he truly wants the American public to move towards like a dictatorial state. Like, he truly believes that like there should be one person just in charge
Let's-
of everything, and that like that person should be more of like a CEO of a
Oh
company.
yeah,
And you
yeah.
should have companies that control. Basically, he wants to bring back like city states that are run by companies, and the CEO of that company runs the city that you live in.
Oh, sure. And then basically, and also, and this is what JD Vance signed off on. He made a comment on a podcast of removing out the ruling, the leadership class like a tumor, is what he said.
Well,
And
actually, he's also a big proponent of what's called RAGE, which is remove all government
yeah,
employees.
yeah, and but also getting to the point where he wants to remove all university employees and basically sell off the land. Because it's on prime real estate. That's what he said. These universities are on prime real estate. And so, because I guess, when you're educated, you're too liberal, I guess. The thing is that we used to have, and this is what kills me, we used to have high-minded conservatives in this country. I'm sure you've heard of William F. Buckley Jr. He was, a big proponent of intellectual, conservative thought. We don't have that anymore. I mean, when Epstein is the pinnacle of your intellectual thought on the right, a guy who I guess sounds articulate, so we're going to say he's intellectual. I mean, that's the brain rot in the right now.
The right is controlled at this point by a series of people who are worried about nothing more than their personal interests, and they truly feel that people who have made a lot of money are smart, and they feel like they can help sustain that money, and that's really all that matters. They are willing to break down personal freedoms for every single citizen in the United States as long as they get to keep the money that they have and make it grow. And the
Yeah.
best way that they know how to make it grow is to treat America like a Fortune 500 company, where anytime you have a profitable quarter, fire an extra 200 people and make it an even more profitable quarter. And that's how they want to treat us.
Did you see my piece on heresy?
I did not yet, no.
And so basically, the thing that scares me, and you know what a heretic is because you grew up Catholic, but to me, a modern day heretic is somebody that believes in nothing. And that is what we call a nihilist. And so nihilism, for those of y'all who don't know, is basically the belief that nothing matters. And so that's what we're putting up on the right. They used to be principled people that believed in family values and all this, that, and the other. They don't believe any of that shit. They basically believe they're transactional, as you described. Whatever's going to be best for me in the moment. And to me, as somebody who's fought conservatism in academia for my entire life, the cry used to be that against liberals was that liberals were moral relativist, which is basically the idea is that what's morally right for you may not be morally right for me. They've replaced this moral absolutism with no morality whatsoever. Truth exists. Your truth and my truth might be different, but there is truth, and it exists. And to me, a vote for the right now is a vote against truth. It's a vote for nihilism, which is, to me, you can complain about any ism that you want to in your life. You can complain communism, socialism, fascism. The worst ism is nihilism.
See,
Because if
I'd
nothing's
argue,
happening,
Scott, I'd argue it's not nihilism, because nihilism means you truly have zero beliefs, and there's also a don't care as much with it, right? Where I feel like these people have no moral belief, but they're willing to go in whatever direction that the money will flow. I think, like I've talked a lot before, but like I listened to a podcast that studies Alex Jones, and I feel like he's a perfect microcosm for the far right, where Alex doesn't have any true political beliefs. Alex will say whatever he wants to say that will get people to his website to buy his products. Trump doesn't have any political beliefs. Trump will say whatever he needs to say to get you to buy his fake watch or his sneakers or to donate to his campaign and now we're at the point where all these Republicans will literally just say whatever they think that you want to hear, which will lead to you donating. I don't know if it's nihilism as much as it's more just flat fucking con manism.
yeah, I mean, I guess we need to come up with a new term.
Because, like, to me, nihilism means like you don't believe in anything, but you also don't fucking care, right? Like there's a nonchalance to nihilism that the Republican Party doesn't have. They care, but they care about getting your vote, and they care.
Well, they care about self. I mean, to me, if in the absence, to me, when I think of nihilism, in the absence of anything else mattering, then you have to matter. I mean, that's how I interpret it.
I mean, it's like nihilistic libertarianism is really it's really where it is, like nihilistic libertarianism, where like I don't want to be governed, but I also want everything to go in my favor. It's a weird combination. They've taken being a libertarian to a whole nother level. I really don't.
Yeah, but we need to be in your bedroom though.
Yeah. I like literally when you think about it, like the Republican Party is essentially like that South Park episode, the Toilet Safety Administration is like, I needs to check your asshole, sir.
You better not read that book either.
Hey, burn books. According to JD Vance, censorship is a huge, huge problem in America. But that's going to be all we have for you here this week on this show. If you want to hear more about Scott and I's thoughts on JD Vance and the litany of these topics, be sure to check out the Thoughts of a Native Texan Substack. I had one come out earlier this week. I'll have another one come out tonight. Scott is pretty much daily on the platform, so a lot of good content to read there if you just can't get enough of either one of us.
Yeah, and come to the show page on Facebook. Tim and I are really pretty diligent about making sure we're cross-posting onto our Facebook page. So if you don't want to go to Substack, you find us on the Facebook page.
But hey, if you want to subscribe to the Substack, that would be appreciated as well. But like the Facebook page, subscribe to the Substacks, subscribe to the YouTube page, join the following. But we appreciate everybody who joined us here as we eulogize the Astros season. And hey, we're shifting focus, Scott, onward and upwards to Houston Texans and Houston Rockets basketball. All right, we appreciate everybody, and we will see y'all next week.